The deep silence of space stretched endlessly. Stars burned like cold eyes, watching everything from far away. In the middle of this endless darkness, sensors of the Zyran Empire picked up something unusual. A single dot of light moved slowly across the void. At first, the officers thought it was just debris or a lost probe. But as the readings grew sharper, it became clear. It was a ship. The officers inside the Zyran command station leaned closer to their screens. A few even laughed. The object was small, weak, and slow. Compared to the massive Zyran cruisers, it was nothing. Yet it was moving with purpose. Its engines burned with steady rhythm, as if the crew inside had no fear. The commander of the watch narrowed his eyes. "Identify," scanners hummed, beams reaching out. Soon the result came back. The ship was human. For a moment, silence covered the command room. Then whispers began. Humans. The name was almost a joke in the Empire. They were new to the stars. Weak, scattered, not even part of the Great Council. The Zyran Empire had maps of their systems. Small, poor worlds with no real fleets, no advanced weapons. What could a lone human ship do here in the heart of Imperial space? Perhaps lost, one officer said. Or broken. Or desperate, another added. But the commander did not smile. He stared at the screen where the single ship glowed. Small, fragile, out of place. And yet it did not run? It did not hide. Far away, inside that small human vessel, the crew sat in silence. Only the hum of engines filled the air. The captain, a man with lines of age on his face, stood near the viewing screen. His eyes were steady. He knew they were surrounded by a vast empire that could crush them in seconds, but his face showed no fear. His crew also sat calm, their hands moving carefully over the controls as if they knew something no one else did. The Zyran fleet moved quickly. Orders were sent, and within hours dozens of ships surrounded the human vessel. Massive destroyers, sharp and dark, circled it like wolves around a lone traveler. Their weapons charged, shields lit up, ready to strike. From the Imperial flagship, a message was sent. "You are trespassing in the territory of the Zyran Empire. Shut down your engines and prepare to be boarded." The human ship did not answer at once. Minutes passed. The silence grew heavy like a storm waiting to break. Inside the Zyran command halls, some officers grew restless. Why was the ship not begging? Why was it not explaining? Weak races always begged. At last, a voice came through the channel. Calm, deep, human. "This is Captain Elias Monroe of the Terran vessel Resolute. We come with no threat. We come with a warning." The words echoed across the Zyran fleet. A warning from this? Officers laughed openly now. Some even mocked. But the commander of the fleet did not laugh. He watched the human face on the screen. The eyes were steady, cold, unshaken by the hundreds of guns pointed at him. "What warning can a broken species give to the Zyran Empire?" the commander asked. His voice was iron. The human captain did not blink. "You believe strength is measured in numbers, in ships, in firepower. You are wrong." The crew of the Resolute stayed still, their eyes fixed on their leader. The Zyran fleet tightened its circle, weapons locked. The Empire was ready to crush this single insect of a ship. Yet something strange was in the air. The commander felt it in his bones. Why had this human ship come alone? Why did it face the Empire without fear? Why had the humans dared to enter this place at all? The human ship drifted slowly, its engines glowing softly. From afar it looked harmless, almost fragile. But to the commander's eye it felt different. Something about it was wrong. Something about it was dangerous. Inside the Empire's war room, debates grew louder. Some said destroy it at once. Others said capture the humans, study their technology, humiliate them. Yet no one could deny the unease that spread quietly across every officer who looked into the eyes of Captain Monroe. The stars around them burned cold. The fleet waited. The human ship remained silent again, its calm presence heavier than the threats of 1,000 enemies. At last, the commander gave his final order. "Prepare the strike." But before the words could reach the gun crews, the human ship spoke once more. "You think this is only a ship," Captain Monroe said. His voice was steady but sharp, cutting through the silence. "But this single vessel will change everything you believe about humanity." The transmission ended. For a long moment, the Zyran commander did not breathe. His ships were ready to fire, but his mind was not steady. For the first time in years, doubt touched his heart. He stared at the fragile human vessel and wondered, was he staring at the beginning of something the Empire could not stop? The silence of space deepened. The circle of warships closed tighter. And still the lone human ship remained, waiting, watching. And somewhere in the cold vastness, history began to turn. The circle of warships closed tighter. The Xiran fleet, proud and unchallenged for centuries, now surrounded the small Terran vessel Resolute. To the eyes of the Empire, it was only a fragile shell. One strike could turn it into dust. Yet the humans inside did not show fear. They sat calm, hands steady, as if they had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Their captain stood tall, his voice still echoing in the memory of every officer who had heard him. This is not a threat. This is a warning. In the Xiran flagship, laughter filled the command deck. Pathetic, one officer said. Do they really think words can protect them? But the fleet commander, Admiral Valar, did not laugh. His eyes remained on the lone human face on the screen. Something in the man's gaze disturbed him. It was not arrogance. It was not madness. It was certainty. The Admiral gave his order. Open a direct channel. I will speak to this Captain Monroe myself. The screen flickered, and once again the Terran captain appeared. Calm. Focused. The background of his bridge was plain. Nothing like the shining halls of the Empire's ships. The crew behind him looked tired but unbroken, their eyes fixed on their leader as if he carried more than his own life on his shoulders. Human vessel, Admiral Valar said, his voice cold. You stand before the Empire. Your kind has no place here. You are surrounded by hundreds of ships, each strong enough to end you. Explain your presence or be destroyed. The human captain did not bow. He did not tremble. He only said, You believe numbers decide the outcome. But numbers lie. Gasps rippled through the command deck. Such defiance was rare even from powerful rivals. To hear it from a weak human was almost unthinkable. Officers demanded permission to fire. Crush them now, they shouted. But the Admiral raised his hand. No, we wait. He leaned closer to the screen. If you are not a threat, then why come here alone? Why bring your fragile ship into the heart of our territory? The human captain's eyes did not waver. Because one ship is enough. The words sank deep like stones in still water. The command deck fell silent again. Enough? Enough for what? The Admiral narrowed his eyes. Are you threatening the Empire? Captain Monroe shook his head slowly. I am reminding you of a truth you have forgotten. Empires fall not because of size, but because they cannot see what is coming. Tension grew like a storm. The Xiran officers shifted uncomfortably. Their weapons were locked. Their shields glowed. But none of it eased the strange weight pressing on their chests. The humans should be begging, yet they were not. On the bridge of the Resolute, silence reigned as well. The crew watched their screens as enemy ships closed around them. They could see hundreds of warships, each more advanced, each armed with weapons that could tear their small vessel apart. And yet, none of them moved. One young officer whispered, Captain, they are ready to fire. Monroe placed a hand on the officer's shoulder. Let them aim. They will not understand until the last moment. Back on the flagship, Admiral Valar felt his patience thinning. He could not allow a single human vessel to insult the Empire. His fleet waited for the signal, their fingers ready to unleash fire. Yet something inside him hesitated. Scan them again, he ordered. The sensors worked. They read every detail of the Terran vessel. Its weak engines, its thin armor, its primitive weapons. Nothing was unusual. And yet nothing made sense. No sane species would send such a fragile ship into the jaws of death. The Admiral's second officer whispered, Sir, perhaps this is a trick. Perhaps there are hidden fleets nearby. But the wide void around them was empty. No reinforcements, no armies, only the lone ship. The Admiral's jaw tightened. He turned once more to the human captain. You speak of warnings and truths. You speak as if you hold power. But I see only weakness. Tell me why I should not give the order to erase you. Captain Monroe's answer came without pause. Because if you do, you will learn why humanity survives when others fall. The word struck like a blade. The Admiral's heart clenched. He felt anger, but also unease. Around him, his officers demanded action. The Empire could not be challenged like this. Yet still he delayed. Fire. One of the younger commanders begged. Show them what it means to stand against us. The Admiral raised his hand, preparing to give the order. The silence before the strike hung heavy. On the human ship, the crew waited. Their faces calm, their hands ready. The engines hummed, steady as a heartbeat. The Admiral stared at Captain Monroe one last time. The human's eyes seemed to pierce through the screen, steady and unblinking. And then, in the cold silence of space, the Admiral gave the command, "All ships, prepare to fire." The void trembled as hundreds of weapons powered up, glowing like suns. Energy gathered, filling the dark with deadly light. The Empire's pride and strength aimed at a single fragile target. The Resolute did not move, did not run, did not beg. It simply waited. And in that waiting, a new fear began to grow in the hearts of the Empire's warriors. For the first time, they wondered if this human ship truly was what it seemed. For the first time, they wondered, what if the warning was real? The void burned with the light of 100 charging weapons. Each Zyran ship glowed like a star of death, its cannons ready to unleash fury. The Empire had never lost to a single vessel, never even imagined such a battle. To them, this moment was already decided. On the bridge of the Resolute, the crew sat calm. The captain's voice was steady. "Hold positions. Do not return fire." His crew obeyed. Their hands did not tremble. They trusted him completely, as if they had already seen the outcome. From the flagship, Admiral Valar gave the final order, "Fire." The dark exploded with light. Hundreds of beams and missiles streaked across the stars, cutting toward the fragile human ship. The energy was enough to shatter moons, enough to burn cities into glass. No one believed the Resolute would survive. But then the impossible happened. The human ship shimmered, not with shields like the Zyrans knew, but with something else, something invisible, yet unbreakable. The weapons hit, but they did not destroy. The beams bent away, missiles lost their path, fire dissolved into nothing. The tiny vessel floated untouched, as calm as before. Gasps filled the Zyran command halls. Officers stared, unable to believe their own senses. "That is not possible," one shouted. The Admiral gripped the edge of his chair. "Scan again." Scanners worked furiously, but the results only deepened the mystery. The human ship carried no shields, no weapons powerful enough to repel the attack. And yet, it stood unharmed, as if the Empire's greatest strike had been nothing more than dust in the wind. The human captain appeared once more on the screen. His voice was calm, almost cold. "Do you see now?" The Admiral's heart pounded. He had commanded fleets that had crushed rebellions, destroyed enemy armadas, conquered worlds. Yet never had he seen something like this. "What have you done?" Valar demanded. Captain Monroe answered slowly, "We have learned what you cannot understand. Weapons are not always power. Sometimes the greatest weapon is what you cannot see, what you cannot control." The Admiral's officers shouted again, demanding another strike. "Increase power! Fire again!" And again the fleet unleashed its fury. The void shook with storms of light. Entire planets could have been burned with such energy. Yet when the fire cleared, the small human ship still floated in silence. Unbroken, unmoved. The Zyran fleet fell silent. Fear crept in. If their weapons meant nothing, what was left? On the bridge of the Resolute, one of the younger crew whispered, "Captain, they will not stop." Monroe's eyes narrowed. "They do not need to stop. They only need to understand." He turned to his communication officer. "Broadcast now." A signal burst from the Terran ship. It was not a threat, not a demand. It was something else. The signal carried data, images, records, truths. Across every Zyran ship, screens filled with the history of humanity. They saw worlds burned, yet rebuilt. They saw enemies greater than the Empire, yet beaten by human persistence. They saw fleets lost, colonies destroyed, and still humanity endured. They saw how humans, weak and small, had faced extinction countless times and still survived. It was not technology. It was not numbers. It was something deeper, human will. Every officer who watched felt it. A chill crawled up their spines. This was the secret. This was what made one ship dangerous. Humanity did not surrender. Humanity did not accept defeat. Even with nothing, they found a way to fight, to endure, to rise again. The Admiral stared, his throat dry. This is madness. But inside his heart, he knew it was not madness. It was truth. The human captain's voice echoed again. You see weakness, but weakness is a mask. You see fragility, but fragility hides steel. You think this is only a ship, but it carries the weight of our history, our defiance, our promise that we do not break. The Zyran officers trembled. Their empire had ruled with fear, with overwhelming strength. Yet against these humans, fear did not work. Strength meant nothing. The Admiral whispered almost to himself, if one ship can stand against an empire, what happens when there are more? The thought spread like fire. Officers looked at each other, realizing the same truth. If one human vessel could resist, then a fleet of them would be unstoppable. And if humanity's will was truly as strong as the signal showed, then no empire could ever truly crush them. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Valar felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. His ships were still armed, still ready, but none dared to fire again. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Monroe watched silently. He knew the message had been delivered. Not by weapons, but by truth. Humanity's greatest secret was not a new gun or shield. It was the spirit that refused to die. The stars hung silent once more. The Empire's vast fleet floated in hesitation, staring at the tiny ship they could not touch. And in that silence something shifted. Fear turned into respect. Hatred turned into caution. And the balance of power in the galaxy began to tilt. The silence after the failed strikes was heavier than any weapon. Across the Zyran fleet, crews sat, frozen, their screens still glowing with the strange Terran transmission. History after history, images after images. Humanity's endless survival burned into their minds. No fleet, no empire, no extinction had ever broken them. Admiral Valar sat in his command chair, his jaw stiff, his thoughts louder than the alarms that had now gone quiet. For the first time, the Empire's pride had cracked. He could feel it in the unease of his officers, in the trembling voices of his commanders. They were no longer looking at the human ship as prey. They were looking at it as something unknown, something dangerous. The screen flickered again. Captain Monroe's face returned, calm as ever. His voice carried through the void, not loud, but steady. You have seen what your weapons cannot change. You have seen what your power cannot erase. Humanity has survived everything, and we are still here, and now we stand before you. The Admiral clenched his fists. His empire had ruled through strength and fear, crushing rebellions, destroying rivals, erasing threats before they could rise. But here was a threat that did not bend. A threat that did not even strike back, yet still forced the Empire to pause. One of his officers whispered, "Admiral, what are they?" The Admiral's answer was silence. Monroe's voice cut through again. "We did not come to conquer. We did not come to kneel. We came to deliver one message." Every Zyran ship went still. Even the crew held their breath. The human captain's eyes sharpened. "Attack us again, and you will learn why humanity survives when others fall." The words fell like thunder, quiet, but unstoppable. They did not sound like a threat. They sounded like truth. The Zyran command deck broke into chaos. Officers shouted in disbelief, some in anger. "They are bluffing. Destroy them now. We cannot allow this insult." Admiral Valar rose slowly, his voice cutting through the noise. "Silence." The room fell quiet again. His gaze locked on the human captain. For years, the Empire had believed humans were small, fragile, insignificant. But in this single moment, standing before a single ship, the Admiral realized that belief had been a lie. This was not weakness. This was not madness. This was will. He spoke carefully, each word slow. "If you carry such a warning, then tell me, why should the Zyran Empire listen? Why should we not finish what we started? Monroe did not blink. His reply was simple. Because you cannot. The word struck deeper than any weapon. Around the admiral, his officers grew restless, but none could deny the unease crawling through their veins. They had fired. They had struck with everything. And yet nothing had worked. The admiral leaned forward, his voice low. What is this power you wield? Monroe's face remained still. It is not a power you can steal. It is not a weapon you can copy. It is humanity itself. Every time we are pushed, we rise higher. Every time we are cut down, we come back stronger. You look at us and see weakness. But what you fear, Admiral, is not our strength. It is that we will never stop. The command deck was silent again. His words sank like ice into their bones. In that moment, every officer realized something terrible. The Empire could crush 100 fleets. It could burn 12 worlds. But it could never end this spirit. Humanity was not just another species. Humanity was a storm that could not be stopped. Admiral Valar's eyes narrowed. For years he had believed the Empire's might was absolute. Now, staring at this fragile ship, he saw the first crack in that illusion. Behind him, his second officer whispered, Admiral, if they are right, then our war is already lost before it begins. The Admiral said nothing, but in his chest he felt the truth. On the bridge of the Resolute, Monroe gave his final words. Remember this encounter. Remember this ship. Because one day when humanity comes in numbers, you will know what it means that we do not break. The transmission ended. Silence ruled the Empire's fleet once more. Not a single weapon fired. Not a single order came. The Admiral looked around at his officers. Fear, doubt, and something else. Respect. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the small vessel floating unharmed before him. A single ship, yet it had changed the way his empire saw the universe. He whispered words no one had expected to hear. Stand down. The fleet's weapons powered off. Engines cooled. Across the void, the Terran ship drifted quietly, untouched, its mission complete. The Admiral knew the truth. This was not the end. It was the beginning. A single ship had come with a message, and now that message would spread like fire across the stars. The Xeran Empire would never look at humanity the same again. The order had been given. Stand down. Across the void, the Xeran warships obeyed one after another. Their weapons cooled, their shields dimmed, their engines held still. For the first time in centuries, the Empire's fleet had faced an enemy and chosen silence over destruction. The lone Terran ship floated at the center of it all, calm, steady, untouched. On its bridge, Captain Monroe stood with his crew. He gave no cheer, no smile. His mission had never been about victory. It had been about the message. And now the message was delivered. Inside the Xeran flagship, Admiral Valar stared into the darkness. His officers were restless. Some still burned with anger. Some trembled with unease. All of them knew the truth. The Empire had failed to crush a single vessel. And worse, they had seen what no commander wanted to admit. Fear had taken root. One officer finally spoke, his voice low. Admiral, what are we to do now? Humanity is different. The Admiral's jaw tightened. His pride told him to erase the humans, to fire until nothing remained. But his instincts whispered another truth. If he destroyed this ship, the memory of it would only grow stronger. The Empire would become blind to the storm that was coming. And storms never vanish because one tries to ignore them. He closed his eyes, remembering the human's words. We do not break. That thought stayed with him like a scar. News of the encounter spread quickly. Within days, whispers ran through the Empire's military, then through its people, then through its rulers. At first, the story sounded impossible. One Terran vessel standing against the full might of the Xeran fleet. A lie, many said. A story twisted by fear. But then the recordings appeared. Every image of the failed strikes. Every word spoken by the human captain. Every record of weapons that could not touch the fragile ship. Proof spread faster than denial, and the Empire could not contain it. The council met in secret. Voices clashed. Some demanded war, to destroy the humans before they became a true threat. Others urged caution, warning that any strike would prove the humans' words right. And a few, the wisest, whispered of something more dangerous than war: respect. For the first time, the Empire looked at humanity not as prey, not as insects, but as a question. Who were these beings who had survived the impossible? What else were they hiding? And if one ship could carry such weight, what would happen when their fleets grew? In distant halls, scholars studied the human signal. They saw not technology but history. They read of battles against greater foes, of wars fought with nothing but will, and in those stories they found a reflection the Empire had forgotten long ago. Strength was not in weapons. Strength was not in numbers. Strength was in the refusal to surrender. The Zyran rulers argued, but in their hearts they already knew. The galaxy had changed. Back on the Resolute, Captain Monroe sat in silence. His crew watched him, waiting for his words. At last he spoke softly. "They will not forget us now," a young officer asked. "Was this victory, Captain?" Monroe shook his head. "No, this was a warning. And warnings are only the beginning." The Resolute turned slowly, its engines igniting once more. The ship drifted away from the circle of the Empire's might, leaving behind silence heavier than war. It carried no trophies, no conquered enemies, only a truth that now echoed across the stars. One ship had stood against an empire. One message had shaken the balance. As the Terran vessel disappeared into the black, Admiral Valar remained on his bridge. He knew what he had seen. He knew what his empire now faced. And though his pride fought against it, he whispered words few could ever imagine leaving his mouth. "They will come again, and when they do, we will not be ready." The stars outside burned cold, but to the Admiral they no longer looked the same. For centuries the Empire had ruled the galaxy with iron. But now, somewhere in the dark, a small, fragile species had shown them a truth more powerful than any weapon. And that truth would spread. The Zyran Empire was not afraid of ships. It was not afraid of weapons. It was afraid of humanity. The galaxy had changed forever, because one ship had been enough.